Eric,
Omar.
they tried to stop us.
They tried to stop us, but there's too many us.
There's too many Erics. See, you try and take one Eric down and another Eric pops up without revealing details, Sir Helms. Let the Dear Iron Cult in on a little secret of what was supposed to transpire today with today's episode. What's been happening, actually, it's been quite frankly a consistent theme, I would say, with Iron Culture for 2023. Numerous people around us suddenly falling ill. Catch them up to speed, because we have a banger, nay, a monster episode, but we have to inform you what happened prior to beginning this episode.
And it's been a pattern. You know, they've definitely tried to stop us. There was the one quote unquote episode, which was a 15-minute pre-cap of what was going to be going on while I was in Texas. That was just me, you know, but they couldn't stop an episode from coming out weekly, every single week, except for the weeks we don't have one come out, which has occasionally happened, but it won't happen regularly. You know, then we've had a few episodes that have been just the two Erics, now that we are the Holy Trinity. Got to tell you, Omar, those are tough to start. We're waiting around. Nobody says Eric. And then last time we both thought, you know what, I'll be the one to say Eric. So we both said Eric, and then we both said Eric. And then that was awkward. So the closest thing to stopping us is us stopping ourselves with our terrible intros. But the people trying to stop us, the unknown they, who...
We haven't identified them up until this point in time, but we know they're out there, correct, Eric?
They are out there. And they may or may not be government agents who are actually demonic agents of an entity that we bonded over, that inserted itself into our lives. But with the power of draperism, I think we are holding steady. And also, just the power of adding more and more people to our ever-growing, unclear list of hosts means that you got to take a lot of us out all at once to really... We're like a cell-like structure, because people don't know where Omar is. Like, he's always moving. Backgrounds change. You know, he's on the go. Some people say he's always in Toronto. He never leaves. And if he's outside of Toronto, he's too stressed. He won't be on the episode at all. I say fake news, even though I just created it right now. The news I just created, that's fake news. But Trexler's out there now. He's holding it down in North Carolina.
Okay.
He's actually being held down right now in North Carolina by the man, by the they. But I'm here, and you're here, and there's always going to be at least one of us here, folks. And there's an obelisk right there with Dr. Connor Heffernan on it. And even if the top of the pyramid's not necessarily fully fleshed out, we got the mass cast right below us. One of them we elevated, you know? So between the I don't know, we're like Wu-Tang Clan now. Between the 16 of us, somebody's going to spit some bars.
Eric, we are Legion, and that obelisk, gosh, we really should have thought of this when we erected said obelisk. We did not supply Connor with some sunscreen. So our man has just been cooking out there. But fortunately, we have Dr. Connor Heffernan coming back for another episode soon. But I do want to give a shout out to the T-Rex, to Trex Nation, Trex Army, which just has made, you know, a sizable impact already on Iron Culture, but he was going to join us today. He's fallen a little under the weather. And I mentioned that because it was curious, Eric. I would say all of us were going a lot. We're making a lot of different moves. But last year, as an example, I got a little under the weather. But then when we went to the UK, that's when I started after that. This is during summer, download that sleep app. I'm like, oh, what do you know? It's like 5 hours. Like, that's not good. So anyways, UK for myself. Then the UK trip was overall successful. We go then to Austin in July. Both videographers fall ill, okay, at the end. They get hit. They try and stop us from interviewing Ronnie Coleman. Not going to happen. Yeah, buddy. Ain't nothing to it but to just hit record, okay? And then we move on. And then I have my boy, shout out to Joseph. He came. He's the one that filmed all the Mike Israel videos. And then he felt ill again, okay? It's catching. The next film you have to watch, the next horror film, Eric, It Follows, because they're releasing a follow-up called They Follow, and maybe it's they who are indeed following us. But anyways, there has been a pattern of illness Now, some might just say it's the normal, like the change in the seasons. Trexler, like he has a lot of different obligations. It was bound to happen. But I prefer to create a narrative. We prefer to create that narrative that someone or some people are pursuing us and trying to prevent us from sharing our knowledge with you, dear listeners. So every single episode could be our last, not because, we are going to die. One of us may, two of us may, but we have 16 members here. So they cannot stop us collectively.
That's right. We're a unbeatable cell structure, pirate radio, resisting the oppressors. You can't stop us. Who's oppressing us? I don't know, but they're oppressive, and we're impressive, and we're going to move forward. So, shout out to the other Eric. He's a little under the weather, but he's never being held down. He's going to be back. I have confidence in that. And if he's not back, we're going to edit this out and not release this episode at all. So, Brandon, just take note. If you're not too sick right now to do so.
Brandon's also sick.
Yeah. So, and Brandon was actually just doing a whole lot of filming for 3DMJ while we were at Worlds.
Right.
Which just was only, just short of 2 weeks ago. It'll be 2 weeks ago when this comes out. So he's been working. I've been working. We've been working, but we're still here, damn it.
Speaking of working, Eric, this is the topic today because we're going to jump into it, okay? Normally we do the 10 minutes of banter, but our foreplay game, it can't get none better. We only need 5 minutes to get warmed up. We're already ready to get into it because I think this is a very interesting topic. And I do want to, Eric, unfortunately, I'm resurrecting Eric's Prep 2023. People think, like, did Eric mention? No, I'm the one that's saying, let's talk about this. And I do want to use you as an avatar to talk about advanced hypertrophy, okay? Something that I think has been gaining in momentum in the space, the whole concept of what is this elusive natural limit. And usually it's within the context, Eric, of how much muscle can one build. It's never also has that added variable, that added dimension of how lean can you get? So what is the maximum level of aesthetics can one obtain at a lean level of body fat? It's usually like, okay, how can I maximize my total amount of muscle and be like, I would say honestly below like 25% body fat, because some people go bear mode where they do accumulate a good amount of extra just total body weight. But I would say for them, it's usually between like 13 on the very lean side to maybe 25%. And so this question, we've had various people, like I just had, shout out to my man, Bald Omni Man, Paris, he came down, we trained. Guy's a stud, was excellent training. He put in a lot of work. His physique is excellent. You see other people like GVS with the work that he's put in over the years. And because they've documented it, people are like, oh, wow, like there are, maybe it challenges some preconceived notions. Then we flip it to you, Eric. And on your side, I would say not just being an Eric supporter, an Eric stan, in a different way, because competitive bodybuilding is an entirely different sport where one not only accumulates muscle mass, but then you have to whittle down all that body fat in order to present a package. And that's why it's going to be an interesting conversation. It's not only about building advanced hypertrophy, but then retaining as much of that newfound muscle as possible as you reach this low. So I think there's a lot of different interesting points. And then maybe I do want at the very end, Eric, a little bit of nostalgia where like back in my day, where a lot of people talking about the natural limit, it's almost like, let's call it natural bodybuilding, not competitive bodybuilding, but just people where their primary focus, what would you call it, Eric? If it's the primary focus is more hypertrophy, leanness is a variable, but it's not as important, but they care more about size. What would you call those enthusiasts? Like, would you say natural bodybuilding? Like, what would you say?
I would just call them non-competitive bodybuilding, and I don't even know if you need to, like, you're natural and you're interested in building the biggest, best physique you can, but because you don't compete, there's a different calculus that goes into it. Because you're thinking about like, what's a level of leanness I can sustain and walk around with, and maybe I'll cut down for summer and then have those picks. But it is a definite, and it should be a different mentality to a competitive natural bodybuilder for sure.
100%. No, and Eric, I want you to kick this off. I want to talk about you specifically, and then your approach or how you plan on changing things, if at all, in order. And we need to first off qualify what is being an advanced level lifter, advanced hypertrophy. But I want to get nostalgic just for a temporary second and say, when people talk about the whole concept of this natural limit, they almost forget, like a decade ago, where I would say hypertrophy was supreme. It was over, powerlifting, strength training. Most people in the space that had the louder voices, they were participants on some level, either actual competitive bodybuilding. So like I remember like Matt Ogus or like Chris Lovato. I saw like Chris Lovato as an example, Eric, as an aside. I saw Chris Lovato post a recent photo, and I mean no shade to anyone in the natural community. Put my name up there next to him. Dude's looking better than basically like 90% of people. So it's like these people exist. There have been people that have developed stellar natural physiques in this space, or when we talk about 2013, like whatever, some of the competitors out, like Lane Norton, like Ryan Doris, like what's Josh Hyduck?
Josh Hyduck, yep.
Like there's so many names that almost, it's just interesting to me, the current conversation. It's sort of like what's happening with powerlifting, where people's like, who's Ray Williams? Where they're like, what's the natural limit? And it's like, meanwhile, there's a dude that's like 20% bigger than everyone currently right now a decade ago, and they're just like ignoring it. They're like, well, I think you could go from like 17-inch arms to, I'm just making up, like 18-inch arms. I'm like, Lane had 18-inch arms like in 2011. Like we've achieved this, but I think the conversation about advanced hypertrophy is very interesting, because I think a fair number of listeners, Eric, have been lifting for a long period of time, maybe not just specifically hypertrophy, but it's a tantalizing topic simply because people want to know what is possible. You're leading now the charge as you just became a pro. Congratulations. And you are hungrier more than ever. Like, I want to hear from you. But what are you going to do differently? Let's talk about advanced hypertrophy.
Yeah, man. No, I think it'll be cool. Like for those who are like, geez, I don't want to hear more about Eric's bodybuilding journey.
Too bad.
We covered that. A, too bad. No, B, in all seriousness, this is really just going to be the step into it, so I can have some useful context of how this gets applied on an individual basis. But really, I think this is a broader conversation that is going to help you, dear listener, understand the even concept of what it is to be advanced, the concept of quote unquote natural limits, and then the actual methods and the approach that you need to take to improve, and how to become a little more nuanced in that understanding and broaden the scope of what that means. Because to stay nostalgic with you for a moment, Omar, I remember very prominent competitive bodybuilders, both enhanced and natural, who told me before they really had a real sense of, who I was, besides the guy I did my first show, I'm 6 foot and I'm in my early 20s, that, yeah, you can very easily expect at 6 foot to be, 190 to 200 pounds on stage, and you'll probably be 220 to 240 in the off season, depending on how fluffy you get. And that, for those who don't know, it's not impossible. And there are examples of people who built physiques like that who are 100% drug-free, but it's not possible for me. Yet at the same time, how do you know that? And why is that something people would be more willing to accept and agree to now than they would 10, 15 years ago? And I think the answer is that there's been so much content and focus on quote unquote natural limits that's come from a mixture of places of I'm, analytical, I want to know this, I'm curious, and I want to plan things out, but mostly motivated by I'm insecure, I want to know, is it worth investing this? Am I normal? Am I doing good? Like, is the grass really greener? Do I have shitty genetics? And a lot more of self-defeating philosophies. And that's not me being critical. Like, I've talked very openly about my own insecurities about how far I could get. And I could definitely see when those take hold of you too much that it short circuits and becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I unfortunately do think a lot of the quote unquote natty or not conversations, which are just a brief 1 degree deviation from the natural limits conversation, are motivated from those insecurities and thoughts of, is it even worth it, or should I just go on drugs, or should I even lift? Which we've talked about many times on Iron Culture. That's not the problem. It's not that we're trying to keep people off gear, so we want to give them, impressive hopes of what they can do naturally. It's saying, listen, you need to have a more meaningful connection to lifting than just, can I have 18-inch arms or 16? So that's the difference. Then you're not going to be in this space with any kind of meaning or benefit from it in 5 years anyway, whether you're pinning yourself in the butt or not. So yeah, I'm not going to keep making you drink the Kool-Aid. If you're here in episode like 250 something, you've already drunk it. So I think the first thing, Omar, that we need to talk about is that being an advanced lifter has a lot of definitions. And it is very difficult to come to some kind of unified conclusion. When you start thinking about it competitively and comparatively, you think about, how do I compare to others? And you could make an argument that I'm not an advanced bodybuilder because there are 6-foot, natural competitors who do compete at 200 pounds, and I'm 25 pounds lighter than that. So I'm clearly an intermediate. But then you can go, oh, but he's a WBF pro. And then we get the distinction between the non-competitors and the competitors. The competitors don't really care about stats in the same way that you see the kind of the internet-obsessed, more quantitative-minded, like non-competitive bodybuilders focus on. They have kind of this old school thing that you see in a lot of the old bodybuilding magazines and books of like the golden ratio between like calves and arms and what body fat percentage am I, and now the kind of modern equivalent of what's my FFMI. Good bodybuilders typically do not focus on quantitative numbers because it's not what they're graded on. They're graded subjectively based upon what they look like. And the standard error that you can get in the actual weights, like bodybuilders get annoyed when you ask them, what's your height and weight? Because the thing that you're asking is not the answer that they are seeking, right? You're not going to, like I had a guy ask me, oh, like in that picture, what was your height and weight? I'm like, if you're using that to set a goal, that's not going to happen. Like when you're 6 foot, 175, unless you are peeled and you have the same structure as me and the same attachments and you're on stage and you have Tanner and you did a peak week, you're not going to look like that or anything even close to it. So that's not the way you should tool your mind to be kind of pursuing things. So visual changes are not the same thing as quantitative changes. The amount of muscle you can carry at 4% body fat is not the same thing as 14% body fat. And your total body weight or a given muscle group's circumference is not going to represent what it visually looks like. And being a quote-unquote advanced lifter is not even something that people agree on. So an advanced lifter, I think the most useful terminology for that is that they cannot make progress at a very fast rate anymore. Doesn't matter where that stacks up next to other people, because ultimately, if they entered that dimension that Mike Israel talked about from Dragon Ball Z, and they trained in this place by themselves, that'd be the only metric they could care about is, am I able to beat my prior self? And then, if you're a non-competitor, yeah, that's all there is. So ultimately, it's not about where you stack up compared to others. It's about, can you make more progress? And that's a tough thing to measure. And it's also a heuristic to think about it in terms of height and weight and numbers like your squat, your bench, your deadlift, etc. So I think one thing to realize is that you can be advanced in one muscle group and intermediate in another. That's something that a lot of people don't get. And then you also have to think about, well, when I make an improvement to a muscle group, is that going to be reflected in any kind of measurement or scale weight change? I've talked about this before in Iron Culture, but I put a big focus on making my lats wider, my delts, medial delts capped more, and my calves bigger. And I also decided I wanted to get leaner this season. And how much actual tissue weight in grams do we think I added to my lats, my delts, and my calves? We're probably talking double to triple digit grams. So we're talking 16ths, quarters, and eighths of pounds for the Americans. And that's the type of thing where it's like you don't take a Duke that day. That doesn't show up on the scale. But visually, because it's a targeted improvement, it will make you look different. And then also, how lean do you need to get to really show that difference? And then how much of a striking difference does it make? And then compared to the last time when you were 5% body fat versus 4% body fat, how much did you hold on to of that? And then, so the comparisons we make are all very relative, and it makes it very challenging and perhaps counterproductive for competitive bodybuilders to focus on some of these things. And it also makes it potentially counterproductive at the advanced level. And that's one thing to realize, but then to hold it also right next to the fact that you do need to have some measurement and monitoring system as an advanced lifter to actually ensure you're making progress, or you could be spinning your wheels for a very long time. It makes it a hard set of calculus to do that has subjective and objective elements that are sometimes in opposition to one another. So simply put, it's hard to make progress in an advanced lifter, Omar. And I'd be more than happy to talk about how I plan to do it. It will be from the perspective of a competitor, but then we can also talk about how would a non-competitor try to traverse these unclear and subjective, objective waters that I'm talking about. But I think the first thing to clear up is being advanced is about how much progress you can make relative to yourself at a given body fat percentage for each muscle group, not just overall, and starting to let go of some of the tropes we have that are actually not data informed related to certain quantitative values. Certain things have kind of just took hold in the evidence-based community that aren't really evidence-based. So the whole concept of fat-free mass index and 25 being a natural limit is one we've already discussed, and that is thoroughly not a natural limit. It's based upon a small sample of people from some gyms in LA, and it actually is contradicted by itself when they looked at the estimated by photos fat-free mass indexes of the drug-free era Mr. Americas. They said, hey, 25 is a limit we saw in this sample of drug-free lifters from this gym in LA. Oh, and by the way, we saw fat-free mass indexes as high as 28. We think when we estimated the Mr. America winners from the before the 60s. And not mentioning, because it's not a history paper, that the Mr. America title is not the top title in this era. It's the highest amateur title, and people would go on to then compete in the universe and be better and bigger, right? And you can only win the Mr. America once. So once you win after the John Grimmick rule is implemented in 41, they're going on to take a better version of their physique, because these guys are mostly in their early 20s. So what about when they're in their 30s, you know? So it's not even the top tier competitors who are looked at in this paper. They weren't necessarily being analyzed by, a DEXA scan. And even then, they had these substantially higher fat-free mass indexes. Oh, and by the way, this was in an era where we had about a third of the population that we currently do. So just statistically, we should really not expect 25 to represent a hard limit by any means. And then on top of that, we have to acknowledge that we don't have data on fat-free mass index in the way that people think it applies. Something, and I don't know where this came from, but people are like, no, fat-free mass index limit of 25 is when you're lean. It wasn't in that paper. Where are you getting that from? People use it that way. They go, no, a stage competition bodybuilder can't be over 25. And then you ask them, what do they cite? And they go back and they cite Corey. And I'm like, no, that paper, all the flaws I just said, but it does not have anything to do with how lean you are. It's just something that kind of took hold. So I don't actually think there is a natural limit, Omar, strictly. Now, this is going to...
Title.
Yeah, there's no natural limit. That's your title.
Eric Helms.
But the funny thing is, there is a functional limit, but it is going to be different for different people, right? So, and it will be different at different body fats, even though it is not 25. The amount of lean mass you can carry is higher when you're higher in body fat. And we see this repeatedly. So when you look at linemen versus linebackers, or when you look at receivers, now there's some selection bias going on there, but when you look at sumo wrestlers versus just regular wrestlers, when you look at the case study that was done on Ray Williams, that you brought him up earlier, the amount of fat-free mass, not necessarily muscle, by the way, that you can carry when you're really high in body fat is a lot. And there is an obligatory gain in lean mass because fat tissue, adipose tissue, consists of some lean mass. It's got to be supported by vascularity. There's got to be cell integrity. There's more skin that comes with that. There's a lot of stuff. And it does also seem that you can probably carry more muscle tissue at higher body fats. That relationship does fall apart at a certain point, especially if you're not lifting, because you become more sedentary, and there's health complications generally that co-vary with higher body weights. But certainly a off-season bodybuilder at 30% body fat, who's deep in the off-season and probably took his bulk a little too far, versus that person then dieting down to 5%, they're going to lose a lot of lean body mass. But it's not necessarily that they could expect anything different than losing that lean body mass, because they wouldn't be able to hold on to it because it's simply above their limit at these different body fat percentages. So if you're open to the idea of there being a natural limit that scales with body fat percentage for you based upon your genetics, your bone structure, and that you may be at different levels of training in different muscle groups, you can start to see how this is complex. And then the final thing, where I say strictly there's technically no natural limit, period, it's probably an asymptote, which is simply a mathematical idea that the closer you get to something, the harder and longer it takes to get there. Now, functionally, that means that our experience will be that there's a limit, but there's not actually. In reality, physiologically, Every single one of our muscle cells is going to be able to grow if there's an adequate stimulus, but there are going to be some barriers to further growth. But there's probably some muscle cell somewhere in our body that could grow at some point, so technically it's not a limit. It's just so hard to maintain peak levels of muscularity in every single muscle group with any kind of reasonable training plan to get to the peak of that asymptote, or the point where it doesn't matter, before the point when you start to run into injury, wear and tear, age, or the psychological lack of motivation to keep doing it. And, that might converge at some point. Someone's like early to mid 50s. But I think what people are really interested in is, can I keep improving?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I keep improving at later points? And to give a shout out to my brother from another mother who competed at Worlds as well, Jeff Alberts placed fifth in the most competitive pro class there was that day out of 16 lightweights. And he was the oldest competitor in that class by over a decade, with Stuart McCullough from the UK being in his 40s, also very impressive physique. But he placed fifth. He beat 11 other high-level competitive natural bodybuilders, the pro division, at Worlds, and he was actually closer to fourth than he was third based upon points. And I was getting mad at Jeff because he kept saying I did pretty good for a 52-year-old. And I said, Jeff, no, this is the best version of you I have ever seen, period. And once he saw the pictures, he believed me. And he posted on Instagram recently, he's like, yeah, Eric kept telling me to stop saying I'm good for 52. He was like, yo, this is just your best. And I've seen him competing since he was 38. And I've seen pictures of him all the way back. And I am 100% convinced, and now so is Jeff, this was his best ever at Worlds. Now, he's a competitor. That means that things like getting better color, peaking better, a lot of things that don't actually have to do with putting on more muscle mass make a big difference. And earlier in his career, 2014, his previous best, the big difference for him was he maintained more of this muscle dieting down. He hadn't necessarily even put on more in the off season. So for him, it's been the concept of stacking all these different lessons and chips together to get in this culminated outcome of him being at his best on stage at WBF World at 2023, maintaining all the muscle mass, keeping it through prep, building back up to his prior peak, and then getting the leanest he has been while maintaining his balance and posing and all that and working around his injuries to be his best ever at 52. And that is a different conversation than what is my genetic limit of muscle mass building, but it's the functional reality that all of us are going to deal with. By the time you get to the point where you are building the most amount of muscle mass your frame can carry, you're going to be running into logistical limits. And I think what most people in the non-competitive sphere are thinking about is, well, when I build the majority of my muscle and it really starts to slow down, what do I do? And I think that is a different conversation, but it also leads a lot of people, and it's an important conversation, and it's a more relevant conversation for our audience, but it also leads a lot of people who are actually intermediates but have done pretty well as an intermediate to identify a false peak or a false plateau or a false sense of where they are relative to their capacity. And, shout out to GVS, Jeffrey Verity Schofield, before he had this kind of recent splurge where he had his kind of second advanced stage growth spurt, it wasn't an advanced stage growth spurt. It was his intermediate growth spurt, and he just needed to figure out what worked best for him to get it. And I think there's a lot of people who haven't yet had that, who think that they're at the end of the rope. So the question is how do you figure out what that looks like? How do you pursue it? And then if you actually have had that second trip to the well, then how do you do it again? So what do you think about all that, Omar?
I think a lot of things, Eric. I think this is a monster power hour episode. There are a few things I do want to say. First, shout out to Jeff Alberts and the physique, the package that he brought on stage in his early 50s. Come on now. If that's not inspiring, I don't know what is. We're straddling the line here, Eric, between naive optimism, because people want to believe, okay? They want something to believe in. And then also just that pessimism that could sometimes encroach upon people when they begin questioning. And I think fundamentally as humans, I think we're uncomfortable with not knowing without being able to not quantify, because I'd say this is the hot take I wanted to say when we said, Eric, before, the bros exist in the cracks. I was going to make the joke about you when someone said, like, yeah, like your bodybuilders would tell you could be like 190 on stage and like you're 175, you look great. And like their answer always, when there's genetic variation between different individuals, just train hard. Oh, he's not training hard. He's not. It's like you think someone, Mike actually Israel did a very good job explaining that about himself. His competitive flair where he went on stage and so forth, and the people, he said, you think I haven't thought about every single thing that you brought up in regards to either my training, my this, my that. It's like, you see what I post online as an example. I think that's why, very quickly, it's not a performative aspect of Mike, but where he'll train for YouTube, probably in some workouts harder than is either A, necessary to make progress, but also B, just to show as a litmus test, like, okay, that check mark where it's kind of the one size fits all, the bros exist in the crack, where they can't answer the unknowns, so they just got to put in, like, turn up the volume, just train a little harder, that he's fulfilling that obligation. That once you start to acknowledge that you have, once again, there's some sort of functional limit that we don't know, it creates, I think, almost once again, a little bit of existential dread within certain lifters. And that is why the hot take I want to say, Eric, is I think competitive natural bodybuilding is definitely, let's just frame this correctly, not for everyone. It's for a select small portion of people.
Almost no one.
But the thing I respect about it, and as someone that likes to quantify, I come from a more of a background, let's say, with either powerlifting or anything that I do, where I like to have a framework of understanding, and it's tethered or tiered in some sort of way to a standard with which I can compare it to, not only to other individuals, but like 400 pounds is 400 pounds. So in competitive natural bodybuilding, I think the beautiful part, because you are competing against other people or judges, that you have a pre-agreed upon notion of what are aesthetically pleasing, like figures, physiques, here's what it should look like. You have a framework of entering a competition to have standards. And I think the problem sometimes within not only the natural community, when you divorce yourself from that, of having some sort of standards, and you get more and more subjective, Eric, to your point, and that's why I just want to talk very briefly about intermediates, and then we're going to talk about this advanced hypertrophy. Unfortunately, what happens is, because there's a certain level of subjectivity, you're measuring your own arms. I have 18-inch arms. Oh, on whose authority? Like, you measure with the tape measure. Was it the exact same place? Was it with the pump? Was it not with the pump? Like, what? Like, your nutrition, your feeding, all these sorts of things. Is that because progress takes longer and longer, there will be some compromises made that I think people are not even aware of, but it amounts to a little bit of coping. To your point, I love what you just said about different levels of muscularity at different levels of body fat. We could literally make a whole episode on that. But basically what a lot of people will do, let's say if they could hold a certain amount of muscle at 10%, they'll float up, so they'll bulk, and their arm measurements are going up. So Eric, they go from 10 to 15%. They go from, I'm making up numbers here, 180 pounds to 190 pounds. And now they're measuring their arms. And again, let's say instead of 17 inches, it's 17.5. Now, what amount of that is muscle mass gained? How much could they retain if they were to go back down to 180 pounds? Tough questions. And that once you start getting closer and closer, not only to your limit, but let's say to measuring objectively your rate of progress, because it becomes hard to point, Eric, where it's like, double digit grams, triple digit grams. We basically keep shifting the goalpost where it's like, well, getting lean doesn't matter. That's fine. That's your prerogative if that's what your goal is. But then your body fat level keeps increasing a little bit. And then it's like, what are you using instead? It's like, well, I just measure myself and I'm just getting bigger. It's kind of like saying instead of going to a powerlifting meet where there's other powerlifters, where there's 3 judges, they're holding you to a certain standard, like a bodybuilding show. Instead, you're just in your garage gym with plates that may or may not be 45 pounds, with your butt that may or may not have lifted off of the bench, with like a lift off where you didn't do the pause. There's a competition level pause, but hey, I hit 10 pounds on the bench press. It's an all-time PR, right? And so I think part of me, and that's why, Eric, and we'll get into the advanced hypertrophy because there's so much to go off of, but that's why I volunteer myself as tribute. We're joking, but like this year, we're now 9 months from now, I'm going to go back to Texas Tech to get evaluated. I think what you just said, because I like to quantify it. Hey, I go there, Grant Tinsley's like, hey, you gained 0 pounds of muscle. It is what I'll take that L like a champ. It is what it is, right? But I want to know. And I think the better question to ask for most individuals listening, because I think the mimicry that occurs, Eric, and maybe you already spoke on that, so you could get right to advanced hypertrophy if you want, man, is what you just said. Different areas can be intermediate, different areas can be also advanced, but also some people can be experiencing what seems like advanced level syndromes where they're not making progress despite, obviously really applying themselves in the gym. But then the final kind of set of variables I'd want to throw out there would just be like your environment, like your overall stress, and just answer for yourself, Eric, because I do feel like for myself, this rebirth recently, where when you're doing your PhD, you didn't compete. Would you be able to actually apply yourself to the same level during your most stressful period? Let's say like the year or whatever time period you want to quantify here. that you would when you weren't doing your PhD, or what Brian Whitaker said about maximizing given the constraints. So I think that's also just a consideration for most lifters that don't do this. Like, they're hobbyists, they don't do this full time. Like, they don't have the luxury. We're talking about content, we're making content, we're doing lifting. Well, we're afforded this extra opportunity. It's like, man, if you got kids, if like someone has like a recital in the evening, then you work like 50 hours a week, and then you have like family, like all these other things like happening to you while you might be training very hard and correctly, and you might be having the symptomology of being an advanced level lifter, as like you have another limit imposed upon you that's acting as a limit, but it's not even your true limit. So like when people just start spinning their wheels or wondering, sometimes it's not just their inherent, let's say, physiological limit, it's other factors. So that's just really the first consideration.
9 out of 10 times, it's not your physiological limits that are holding you back.
Yeah.
Right. And that is one of the reasons, also the just world fallacy of why people are like, we'll just train harder. Because a big tenet and ethos that's attached to the kind of the lifter's mentality is we're in control of our own destiny. We have self-efficacy, we have agency. So if someone is not able to get bigger, I need it to be their fault because therefore I have power to make myself bigger. Also, where victim blaming stems from, folks. It's not always just I hate good people and I want bad things to happen to good people. You know, we want people to be at fault for the things that happen to them rather than just this crazy, wild environment around us and chaos, because then it's a less scary world to live in. So, yeah, fear is a motivator by many people in our industry. And I think it's funny because you get two versions of cope with the type of physiques that people are comfortable walking around with. You have the people who want to be the heaviest, the biggest, the largest arms they can be without looking fat in clothes, right? So it's the 5'6" dude who can barely pull off 200 pounds, but oh, thank God I'm 200 pounds. I got the 18-inch arms, and I'm just barely comfortable enough to take off my shirt at the public pool, and I constantly suck in my gut. Or you get the person who doesn't ever want to measure their arms or talk about lean body mass, and they're trying to get to the leanest they can sustain with only a subclinical eating disorder, right? For the gram, and they're always using filters and stuff like that. And it depends on your personality and what you think gets rewards and which way you want to go. And also, like, what is your physique better at? Is it just not that muscular, so you need to look lean all the time, or can you pull off kind of quote unquote bear mode, as I think that collab video between Alex and Jeff Nippert did. So yeah, personality is a big thing in here, but 100% accurate. It is your environment and your current motivational state that's going to dictate primarily how close you're going to get to that point. And it's a game that gets harder over time because you have to be more creative, you have to be more individualized, and you may have to work harder as you get more advanced to get to the same place. Because a walking program will take overweight, sedentary people and put muscle on them. But if you just started right now walking and you're an advanced lifter and that's all you did, you probably lose 20 to 30 pounds of muscle over 6 months, you know? So it's a very different game as time progresses. So I think that all those things need to be considered, and it is it is not an easy thing to figure out what you need to do to progress in an advanced level. And in some ways, competitors expose them to this unfavorable environment on purpose. Like, the worst environment you can think of for building muscle is what's called contest prep. And what do we do at the end of it? We display our muscle. Like if I said, hey, here's what you need to do. You got to emulate competitive bodybuilders because they show the most muscle possible. Like, okay, I'm buying this. This is logical. Yeah. You want to learn how to have the most muscle at the lowest body fat level possible. You want to build the most muscle possible. You emulate bodybuilders. Okay, what should I do? I want you to start sleeping 5 hours per night. I want you to be super neurotic. And, if you accidentally found out that the rice cakes you ate had 2 grams of fat, not 1, you're tracking it wrong for the last 6 months, I need you to have a nervous breakdown. I want you to, instead of doing just 10 hours of weight training and then that's it, I want you to do 10 hours of weight training and also 10 hours of cardio. Also, when you go into your workouts, I need you to feel lethargic, and I need you to be scared of actually putting a barbell on your back. I want you to be able to do less volume over time, and then make sure that your performance is dipping. And you know how you get all those good calories in? Cut that in half, and then let's see how you go. So it's like the perfect storm of how to lose muscle is what is occurring at the end of a contest prep. And it is a bodybuilder's prerogative to somehow find a way to maintain as much of it as possible. But they're doing it in the face of combined overtraining syndrome and red S, relative energy deficiency in sport. The process of what is ideal for putting muscle on, like if I was to create the perfect study, or even just when I work with an athlete in the off season, it's trying to not have any of the things happen that we know are going to happen during contest prep. So it's a funny thing where I think there is a limited amount of information to be taken from competitors, but non-competitors need to do things differently and think differently and evaluate things differently. So first, I'm going to start with, what does an advanced bodybuilder like me do to try to go from spending 17 years trying to become a WNBF pro to now going, sweet, I placed 7th at Worlds. What do I need to do to place top 5 at Worlds? Knowing that this year, the guy who placed 5th won the WNBF Universe. So he won like one of the most prestigious pro titles, and he's placing 5th. So what's little old Eric going to do? Well, it's going to have to be something different, right? That's the one thing we know for sure is I don't have another 17 years to try to get, if I can, well, maybe I do based upon Jeff Alberts. Maybe when I'm 57, I'll crack the top 5. Maybe it is just time, but I don't think it is. I think it is that we need to take a very targeted approach, a very specific approach, specific adaptations to impose demands. And for me, thinking about what is my FFMI, what is my stage weight, how do I make it go up, is actually the wrong approach. And there is a lot of amateur bodybuilders who think of, how do I make my stage weight go up? If I take a long off season, I should expect to be 5 pounds heavier. And I tell you what, as a coach, we always assume your stage weight's going to be the same or lower than last time, because one of the things you can almost always improve on, not always, some people get really, really lean their first season, is conditioning. So, stage weight is not the variable that a competitor should focus on, in my opinion, unless first time they competed, they were 18, and now they're coming back at like 26, and they only were lifting for a year or something like that. What I'm going to be looking at, and I've actually got a YouTube series started pretty soon on my off season, and we're calling it Believe 2024, Forging the Unlikely Pro Champion. We're going to take a video game footage assessment from each of the 4 coaches at 3D Muscle Journey, Brian, Jeff, Brad, and Alberto, looking at my physique on stage or pictures, whatever they chose. I gave them free reign to do that, and saying, all right, these are the poses that are weak, and here's the muscle groups that are making those poses weak, and then here's what I think you should do about it. And then I'm going to construct an individualized plan based upon that. That means I'm looking at a front double bicep pose, a subjective assessment, not body weight, not the measurement of my arms, and going, all right, what would make that pose more competitive against a field of pros? And that's a very different assessment progress. And from there, we're going to decide, all right, what are my weak points? And then, okay, from there, I go, all right, well, how much volume have I done for my, let's say, for example, I've already got to be feedback from Brad, and I'll just share that. He's like, you know what? I think your quads are comparable. Those are good. I think your glutes need to come up a little bit. I want to see more thickness through your mid-back. The width isn't too bad from the back. And I also want to see more t-shirt muscles, just shoulders and arms. So I read that and I go, okay, do I think that I have more room to grow in my delts, my arms, my mid-back and kind of lower lats, as well as my glutes? And then I have to assess each one of those from a volume perspective. How much have I been doing recently? How much have I done historically? What worked previously? And what do I know is, and then how do those things interact? Like if I'm going to do specialization cycles, can I do a glutes, back, shoulders, and arms specialization cycle? Maybe, but perhaps I should tackle those in separate blocks. So all of this like extensive web of questions then come out of that create a plan that I'm going to take this whole pit crew to help me do. So some things to consider, and this is the only way it really works on an individual basis. Omar, you may remember that I had hip surgery back in 2017. I've actually noticed, and it's been confirmed by my wife, and she knows my glutes better than anybody else, I had a bigger butt before that. And actually even prior to that, because it was around 2013 when the FAI got to the point where I had to curtail my squatting frequency and I couldn't sumo deadlift. But 2011, the show where you saw me get my PNB Pro card.
Was there.
That's we're going to accept that as canon. I was looking back at those pictures and I was like, you know what? My ass was actually bigger back then. And I also noticed in 2009 that when I did get glute striations, they were a little more prominent. And I don't think I was leaner in 2009 than I was in 2019 or this year. This is the leanest I've ever been. And I think it comes down to conditioning. The visibility of muscle separation is a combination of how big and how many ridges and delts and divots and those muscles there are, and then how much fat's on top of them. That's why a big muscular dude can look more separated at 15% body fat than a smaller person at 8, right? So I think I've actually got a fair bit of room to grow in my glutes because I think they're detrained a little bit, almost chronically. Because one of the things that I have found about my physique is I have a more dominant lower body to my upper body. And even though I've been trying to not do as much like quad volume, a lot of the movements that train your glutes also train your quads. So if you reduce your overall squatting volume a good bit, that might be part of the reason, So I think that I have room to regrow some glutes, and that'll probably happen at a relatively quick pace, right? Delts and arms. My arms, I actually think I can probably put some more size on them as well because I tend to get elbow tendonitis when I do a lot of direct arm work. So I wouldn't say I've rested on my laurels, but they've been in the 10 to 20 set range. And I used to do a lot more volume on my arms when I was a young man, didn't get elbow tendonitis. And only about half of that is direct work. So finding a way to move forward, doing BFR work, doing neutral grip work. I'm creative and savvy enough now that I know I could put more work into my arms and I could probably get them, again, maybe not even new growth, but back up to their peak and then push them a little further. I think delts are going to be a challenge. I think that's going to be kind of more of the same. And we've seen that work. I don't know if there's much to go left to the well there, but we're going to try. And certainly lengthen work is something that has been a new addition only for a year and a half. So maybe there's more I can do there. So those are just examples. I'm not going to go through every single one of my muscle groups or all the different poses, but that's the mindset that a competitor would take, trying to improve a visual outcome and really not even necessarily worrying about whether my scale weight changes or whether my inches change. I'm not going to measure across here. Like trying to get a delt measurement, you're actually measuring like how inhaled is your rib cage. Not only are your lats getting bigger, but all your delts getting bigger, is your chest getting bigger, and is your back getting bigger because it's circumference to your whole torso. So some of these things, the only way to measure it is visually. And then the other way is performance and thinking about, am I putting more input into the system? And then what's the fatigue and performance dynamics? So, all right, if I start doing, let's say 25 sets for my delts per week, and the most I've ever previously done is 20, okay. That's a 25%. It's a 25% increase in volume. That's probably the most I would do at any given time. Let's see, am I recovering? Is that impacting my pressing? How sore am I? Am I getting a good sense of stimulus? Am I getting a pump? And then, all right, let's milk that as long as we go, and let's incorporate those metrics, that feedback I'm getting, and looking at, objective outcomes as well. Like, are my lateral raises reps going up? Because again, this is not necessarily a movement that's conducive to, am I increasing my 1 RM on lateral raises? So there's so many elements that make it challenging to get really good, clear data on this. And then it's basically trusting the process. So it's coming up with a really good, targeted, individualized plan based upon the actual things that are measured in a bodybuilding competition, your subjective look in the mandatory poses. And that's why posing is so important. You can make no changes to your physique, pose better, and actually be better on stage. So I think, Omar, I'm going to stop there and give you an opportunity to maybe guide this a bit. That's how I think a competitive bodybuilder would approach this, but it's not necessarily how I think someone who is in the more advanced-ish stages of their lifting career, who's never even going to step on stage.
Eric, I thought you were going to say the secret was 3x11. You've all heard of 3x10. You add that extra rep. It's just a little bit more work. And as we know, a little bit more work over time yields big progress. So I think that was a great window into, let's say, a competitive bodybuilder, what they'll do, especially, and I think, so that is the additional dimension, once again, that you're stepping on stage. And that means by necessity, you have to get down to a certain level of body fat where it's hard to retain, as much muscle mass as possible. So that is the prime focus, as well as like the portions, the symmetries, as it is judged by said judges. Let's then talk about non-competitive lifting enthusiasts, or maybe for themselves, Eric. And it's hard. Like this, we got to eliminate the bros and the cracks, okay? Because the answer almost always for some of them is, gaining a little bit of weight. If numbers go up, which is So numbers going up, we had a previous episode on this where you went into detail, and it's correct, like, if you're making progress, but almost by necessity, like if you're gaining weight, you should also be putting on numbers on the bar, like if you're squatting, if you're deadlifting. So that, not that could be like a false positive, but if you gain like 10 pounds of body weight and you've never been, at that plus 10 pounds of body weight, and your bench numbers aren't going up by like maybe like 5 pounds, assuming it's like overall like pretty quality weight over a long period of time, that would be alarming. So I think my question for you, it's framed a little differently. Let's talk about the non-competitive lifting enthusiast that doesn't need to get lean. What are some major key variables they need to focus on, or how do they assess things so they don't fall into the pitfall that it's not like a bad thing of, okay, I'll be a little bit higher body fat, I'll kind of subjectively assess myself via my own, metrics that I've determined. And no matter what, basically, as a result of that, baby, I'm always making progress because that bench press PR doesn't matter that it wasn't a comp standard. I found that their new lighting, I'm looking good. And I think a little bit of commentary, I want to say for 30 seconds, Eric, to be a little lenient on content creators is I know the pressure of being a content creator where I think the audience, because I think everyone has a certain amount of fear, and fear is the mind killer that pushes the conversation forward. They want to know emphatically, once again, for it to be true that they can make progress. And so content creators feel compelled to say, like, I'm making progress, even if body fat's going up a little bit, angles are getting a little bit better, structure's increasing on the post. Like, how much is actually happening? So they're not necessarily at fault, but let's separate the bullshit from what actually works, Eric. Non-competitive lifting enthusiasts that want to make sustained long-term progress. They feel that they're reaching advanced stages in their lifting career. What would they do, let's say, to essentially be as like big or aesthetic? You just said something that if you're more muscular and you're at 15% body fat, you will have more separation than someone that was less muscular. So like, what would your approach be for someone that, let's just come up with an arbitrary number band, they're never dipping below 10, even like 12%. Like, let's say like a lifting enthusiast, 10 or 12%, but they want to do this long term and they feel they're kind of reaching that point. And they start out, distinction, they're starting out at like a relatively healthy body fat. So they're below like 17%, like actual 17%, Eric, not, YouTube 17%.
Yeah.
So they're like, within a certain range. Yeah.
That's a great way of framing it. And, it's a funny thing because it is assessed differently. There was a comment that came up on a couple different podcasts I did talking about the improvements I made off-season to off-season. And someone said, and they probably have like a low volume kind of hit bias. They're like, Eric said he went through a specialization cycle where he trained his delts every time he trained, 4 sets, 5 days a week. How do we know his delts actually improved and they weren't just like inflamed all the time? And my first thought was, who cares? I looked better on stage next year and my delts were there. Like I literally don't care, because the thing that will determine my success is if I can display larger delts on stage, not whether it consisted of an inflame, which it's not. That's not the way that works. So the repeated bout effect, it's actual muscle growth.
But even if it was like, you're just like hyping, like,
even if it was,
charitable,
let's say I could just be walking around with constantly inflamed medial delts. Yeah, I'm just inflamed, right? That's what's happening. And each time I scratch my nose, I'm like, which I'm not. But let's say it is this edema that I'm carrying around, and it's the natty synthol effect, and I can't go to that well anymore. Like, that's it, And I'm just gonna have to, if I want to be my best, I've got to always be inflamed. Hashtag inflamed delts. It wouldn't matter, right? And to your point, there are some lifters who they're okay with not actually making legit or real progress. They're gaining body weight and they're getting the expected increase in strength, if that's their focus. Because in some ways, it's a win-win. Like, let's say you're 190 and you get fat-ish going to 200 and you get stronger. Well, now you're 200 pounds, which is for some reason an arbitrary metric of being bigger, and you're stronger and you're not quite yet fat. That's a win-win-win, right? So the first thing people have to do is look inward and figure out to them, what does progress mean? But I will point out that to be a little bit more objective about it, to get to your point, if you're only making progress because you gain weight and you're getting the obligatory gains in lean body mass and the obligatory gains in strength, you haven't actually figured out the solution to the Rubik's Cube of how to make advanced progress. that's a short-term solution because you can't keep going. You keep going, and like you said, you're going to get above that percentage body fat where you're no longer happy with it and it just doesn't work for you, and you're like, shit, now I got to cut, and then you cut down, you realize you didn't make progress. Now, one thing we talked about the weight gain study that we did that's kind of making the rounds and that people are uncomfortable with. And the reason I think people are uncomfortable with it is it basically says bulking doesn't work for trained lifters. And I think that is probably true if they're going to follow a 3-day per week program that is not individualized, that is not necessarily really high in volume or high in intensity, right? And that's what we observed. There was only a very, 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 very weak relationship for the biceps with more weight gain equal to more growth. But the groups on maintenance, small surplus, or I should just say not groups, those who gained a little bit of weight, maintained weight, or gained a lot of weight, all gained roughly the same in terms of their strength over 8 weeks, in terms of their strength or their muscle size, and they primarily just increased more body fat. In my experience, Omar, there's only a couple of trips to the well of bulking that you get to make in a lifting career. You get the first one. And this is an important one, because if you were just to start lifting and you don't focus at all on eating more, you'll make good gains. But we have good data to suggest that if you do a lot of eating, you can have the quintessential bulking experience. Like Rosnick and colleagues, they did a similar study that we did. They had, basically 2 groups. There's actually 3. But they split these untrained males into either consuming their habitual diet or consuming a 2,000 calorie per day weight gainer on top of their normal diet every day for 8 weeks while doing a training program, consisting of either carbohydrates and protein or just carbohydrates. So not even necessarily like a super targeted good, diet. And they gained 3 kilograms on average in 8 weeks. That's nearly 7 pounds. So almost gaining a pound a week on average. And on average, you know how much lean body mass they gained? 3 kilos. So they basically, on average, again, gained exclusively lean body mass this whole time. So they're gaining a pound a week of muscle, or at least of lean body mass for every week they're training. That's the perfect bulk. But they're on a cookie cutter program. It just goes to show you, that is there. And if you don't feed enough to actually support it, you can be the person who, as a quote-unquote intermediate, finally bulked, aka stopped having body image issues and got off Instagram for a while and made your first trip to the well when previously you just kind of got like a couple teaspoons of water out of it because you were too afraid to actually be in a surplus because, the internet gave you an eating disorder. So back in my day, before we had a lot of males who unfortunately were getting now, today, similar levels of body image issues, or at least approaching that women have because of the pressures of social media and the changing social norms and the way G.I. Joes look today versus they used to, et cetera, and the comic book heroes getting more and more juicy. There's an intense pressure to stay lean. So people don't make their first trip to the well, and sometimes the thing holding them back is that they didn't do a bulk. So novices, absolutely, you want to do a bulk. You want to eat in a big calorie surplus, and you want to milk and accelerate those gains as much as you can, and you can do that. And then, of course, you think, well, I'm plateaued now. That worked really well. I need to go back to the well. And unfortunately, what people see most of the time is that they repeat that same process, forgetting that any cookie cutter program would have done it. And even a 2,000 calorie weight gainer purely of carbohydrates would have been sufficient to maximize those gains. It's easy to max things out when you're a novice. It becomes much harder when you're a late stage intermediate trying to become advanced. So a case study on GVS, also myself, when I finally realized I just needed to do more for my upper body, I had a second late-stage growth spurt in the 20 teens when my upper body transformed because I simply started training it 3 times a week, and I basically added 50% of my volume to it. We've talked about that. My bench went from 315 to its peak at 363, 165 kilos. And that still wasn't the same. That was the same as going 135 to 225, 90 pounds versus 50. But it was this second growth spurt. I had a successful second trip to the well. Why? Because I found an individualized approach that addressed my weaknesses. And that's the step. And you don't do that just from going, all right, I'm going to gain weight and get the 1 pound per pound gain on body weight and bench that we all get just for being fat, right? Or the 16 to 16 and a half inch fat sep gain. It's just the obligatory thing that comes from gaining weight. You're not learning anything new. So the trick to getting the second trip to the well is figuring out what works for you. And whether there's a third trip is I think probably not. And it's going to look a little bit more like identifying where there's opportunities to make tweaks and fine-tunements, and then taking a little more time. And that's the true advanced gain. I think most people who are listening to this podcast looking for this kind of holy grail, they might still have that second trip to the well. And that's not actually the true advanced gains. For me, in my experience as a coach, that's that late stage intermediate spurt where they have never actually found the custom approach that takes into account their psychology, their environment, their genetics, their body fat percentage, which individual muscle groups are actually weak points or strong points, which things have a predilection to grow, where have they been, really kind of choosing exercises that are not suited to them. Like this whole thing of Alberto's back growing, because he was mostly doing, or non-failure based training tends to result in disproportionate proximities to failure for muscle groups which have exercises which are not biomechanically favorable. Like if you're going really strict interpretation, row to your chest, that 10 RPE might mean that you could do another 6 reps at 75% of that range of motion where there's higher tension. So this kind of widespread poor back development that we see in intermediates is probably a systemic issue related to that. So if you can take someone who is a quote-unquote plateaued advanced lifter and you identify that they have a weak back, that they actually hold back on training legs and their RPEs are really low, that they've never tried anything outside of the cookie cutter box for certain muscle groups, you can actually recalibrate them and say, hey, you're not an advanced lifter. You're an intermediate. Let's try these things. And then if they start to work, then you supply that nutritional environmental support, not trying to force feed gains, but you're creating a custom program to then they can have this bulk where they then put a lot of stage weight on. And you do see it in competitors sometimes too, although it's rarer because they've typically turned over more stones. But big shout out to, say, AJ Morris, as well as Steve Hall, who they've had these kind of late stage spurts as a competitor. And you see their stage pictures, 4 or 5 seasons later. They're also young men comparatively to some of the other folks who we've been in this conversation. And it's like, oh shit, you transformed and your stage weight went up. So I think for most people, what they really need to do is stop looking outward and looking at and asking these questions of what is a natty limit, what's this, what's that? Because what they're kind of doing is going, all right, I'm 10 pounds away from where I think maybe I could get to. And the only answer you're going to find online is just work harder or do more. That may be the answer, but if you've already tried that, how many times are you going to repeat, I'm going to eat a lot and then go to failure and do more volume with the current approach I'm taking and it's not working, before you either decide, no, I'm capped out and I just have shitty genetics, or this isn't worth it, I'm going to quit lifting, or I'm going to go on gear, or I'm just going to get fat and stay fat. Like, you run out of options. And I'm telling you, the thing you need to do is potentially work with someone more experienced or look inward, take a more objective look, a systematic approach, and really try to figure out where there is room for improvement for you, or look at your training history, which hopefully doesn't just consist of program hopping and doing random things that YouTube influencers do, and seeing where at times past the beginner stage that you had some of these nonlinear growth spurts. Because the clues are there. Like I have seen it, like the way I figured out that maybe my upper body needs a little more was when I trained with Jeff, and I actually saw a little bit of regression going on low volume. And I thought the inverse, like, okay, hold on. If my legs were good on low volume, my upper body was not, maybe my upper body will do even better on high volume. And then I finally had the courage to do what was considered high volume back in 2011 of training them 3 times per week with like moderate amounts. So those types of things are what you need to interrogate. And you can right now assess like, oh shit, I'm not tracking my training. I do program hop. I haven't actually thought about different muscle groups in that way. I've always been looking at just my scale weight. So maybe I really need to assess things first. And that I think is the first critical step for someone who wants to move into the advanced stage or make progress at the advanced stage as a non-competitive lifter, Omar.
Eric, too many facts. Or you could just never hold yourself accountable, get increasingly better lighting, get increasingly smaller size shirts, increasing total body weight that you weigh, and just saying, yeah, because as we know, like between, 14 to 17% body fat, they're like 19% body fat. It's hard to determine, but I know I'm making progress. You can see the separation of my muscle. So you just rationalize anything to, what the conclusion is. You got bigger. just work your way back. So like, how did you get bigger? Why just train hard? It's a direct result of all my collective efforts. That is why I got the results I got. I will say, Eric, though, that as a final aside, I do think it's very telling that when this resurgence, which is great as it relates to hypertrophy and people wanting to get bigger, it's largely within the realm of desiring specific muscles. And exactly what you said, you could be advanced in one area, intermediate in another, or even, shout out to myself, novice, like calves. Not even a joke. I've never trained. Like I've never trained them. So it's like they're a novice level muscle group. Like it's possible, but like. So that's the interesting question, though, is that, and I was talking with Paris, so Bald Omni Man. I like you got to refer to the YouTube handle. Paris is the man. We met up, we trained. He did the Rascal ad with me, and he's put in a lot of work. He has a really good physique. Like I think his upper body, I'd rate. I told him this. I could say this like on the podcast. I'd give it like a 9 out of 10 in the sense like he's very thick. He's lean. He's like 205. Like genuinely probably between, I would say 15 to maybe like if we're like true assessment, maybe like 17% body fat, 5'11", 205. So he's looking good, upper body, but the emphasis by the community on a few different things, the dreaded spider physique. What does spider physique mean? Get some, I love, can I just say, I love new terms invented in order to give already insecure young men even more insecurities. But I will just blueberry arms, baby. But what I'll say is that it's interesting to me, and Paris said this. So Paris has a great set of arms, right? His most clicked videos are obviously on arm training or maybe chest training. So it's like there's this resurgence in quotations for desiring to increase one's natural limit, which means total muscularity. But the translation really means the old archetypes of what like young men desire, like kind of like big arms and like big chest. It's the same exact trope. And I told him this, which is cool. Like I think we're going to try to bring back horse legs, Eric. Well, I told Paris this because I saw like his physique and I said, Paris, man, based upon, your training history, genetics, a wide variety of factors, I think legitimately you could put on like probably like 10 more pounds of muscle because I think your lower body's good. But I think, and that's not a criticism, I'm like your lower body, like we're probably, you have a little bit more like lower body muscle mass than me. I think based upon what I see in your upper body, you could do that a lot more. And so it's just telling, and he was joking with me, he said, yeah, man, like on YouTube, like whatever, you'll do like a leg training video and like, it gets like some views, but not as much. So the translation isn't that people want to maximize functionally their limit. It's always to your point, Eric, disproportionately. And I'll just say for myself, my cheat code as a side note for myself now with this resurgence. So I'm the elbow is cooperating, everything is going swimmingly. I'm loving it. Training's going great. But for myself, Eric, as you assess, so you assessed it, Berto assessed it, and even I got the nipples to take a look at the physique. And because I trained my upper body for the history of my training different than my lower body was very strength focused. When people say, oh, Omar, like the arms, whatever, bring up, it's actually my lower body is the part that is just not as big as everything else. Below the belt, Eric, you can quote me on this, I feel there's like 5 pounds of muscle to be had. Now, the existential question for me that we're going to have to answer, and I will find out, I have felt because weight class wise, and this is a large tangent, but I'll get to it. And the 181s in Canada, I could definitely place top 10, maybe like around number 8. If you look comparatively at the numbers, if I ever theoretically wanted to the next weight class up, the numbers I would need to hit at 93 kg is a lot more. Do I have that potential in me? I like straight up, I don't. Here's the hottest take, Eric, that I'm very comfortable saying. I think when I go to Texas Tech, I will absolutely have built an appreciable amount of muscle. Will I then be able to utilize the new muscle mass in order to be as competitive at? I'd be like in between, honestly. I'd be like probably like a 88 kg, something so 89. But like, let's just say you compete 93. I don't think like I'm not even trying to be negative on myself. But bro, the back gets thicker. Great. I'm like, is my bench necessarily going to proportionally jump to that competitive realm? I don't know. But what I do know, Eric, is that the hidden weapon for a lot of people, I will say, like in the natural community, the final aside, if they want just an absolute amount of number to go up, like a scale weight to go up and it to be quality, I think the natural community in general needs to train their legs more. And your legs, your lower body, is probably the largest portion of your potential for gain. So if you want like a joking answer, but you know what I mean, Eric? Like think about actual natural competitive bodybuilders, or let me put some respect on powerlifters because they're getting dunked on right now in terms of their physiques. I have, Eric, never seen, you assessed Alan Thrall. He's strongman, also power, but when he was at his peak in powerlifting, his legs looked very good. The powerlifters I see, Eric, all the time. So shout out, there's this guy, Kyle Graham, Canadian champ, competed at Worlds. So he's my height, he's 93 kg, upper body, his and I, the exact same. His lower body, he literally has like almost 10 kgs in his lower body. Their quads, their glutes, their hamstrings, it's another level. You want the short actual answer? I'm joking, Eric, for like your average, let's say, lifting enthusiast, train your lower body.
No, I totally agree. And, an interesting thing is, so I had, like I mentioned, I got my hip surgery in 2017. And for the 4 years leading up to that, I was only able to do I was doing a low volume generally for the lower body, which fortunately it responds well to. I've definitely hung on to my hamstring size and my quad size. But I do think I can actually get bigger legs overall. Not my quads, not my calves, and to a lesser degree my hamstrings. Maybe my quads can come up a little bit, but I've been purposely holding back there, and I'm finally at the point now where I think having bigger quads wouldn't. I don't know that all the coaches agree. Like Brad is like, I think your quads are good. But I think just because I need everything in my corner to make my waist look smaller based upon how X-framey all these guys are, I think while I don't need to focus on my quads, I think I'd benefit from having bigger quads at this point. And I think I could. So if I do in this off season put a fair amount of work into bringing up my glutes and my quads and they grow even a decent amount, I wouldn't be surprised if my stage weight goes up. I just don't think that's true when you do things like doing an arm specialization cycle or a delt specialization cycle or a calf specialization cycle. But when we're talking about, between your quadriceps, glutes, and hams, which are exactly what are being really well developed between the deadlift and the squat, that's nearly 50% of the skeletal muscle in your body, if not 50% of it for many people. So absolutely, that's a different ball game. If you are someone, competitor or non-competitor, and that's where you bring it up, yeah. So going back to the question of like, what do you value as someone who is seeing progress? Because you do have to ask yourself that. Apparently inflammation doesn't count to seeing, looking at bigger delts. Like if you want to see like on a low volume program, what is my scale weight when I look like I have a top 4 abs? Yeah, you want to drive that number up, get as big a legs as you possibly can, and then you can type on the internet that you weigh that amount. Cheat code, you can just lie. That's what half of them are doing anyway. Just saying. So you don't have to train legs at all, and you just type things out. Win. But no, in all seriousness, yeah, absolutely. I don't think people should be focused on just making an arbitrary number go up in relation to another. But if that's your jam, yeah, like squat, hack squat, leg extension, leg curl, lunge, RDL, good morning. Yeah, man. Like you can, it's challenging. It's very hard. And it's another reason why there's a disparity between kind of the things that natural competitors and natural non-competitors focus on, is that it's not quite as cool to see how your legs look in tights. But actually I can say, to be honest, like I think it could be. Like there's something
we'll bring it back.
That I think even non-competitors, when they see Tom Platz, they're like, yo, that's kind of dope, Or like when they see like DeMayo's calves, or like I think I was really, really like some of the pictures that Jeff Nippard took of my quads when I was in shape in 2019, because I used to struggle because I was doing way too much cardio and speeding myself up with showing quad separation. And then when I took a much more reasonable approach and managed my fatigue in 2019, it was the first time my quads were really like separated. And I was like, whoa, that looks sick, And I've been a competitor who's been like, I need to bring up my upper body. Like I look too small. And my legs were an afterthought. I was like, as long as they're shredded, that's great. But I need to bring up my upper body. And then I finally saw those pictures. I was like, man, I kind of want to be like a natty Tom Platz. I kind of want to be the guy who doesn't need as much lower body development as he has, but he has it. And having those sick, gnarly like glute striations like Berto has, or like Dirk has, or we're going to have on. Stay tuned. I think there's something cool about that, having horse legs. So I really think that is something that it's not like the top tier thing. It's never going to be like, oh, sick. But it's going to be like, like if you like a certain band and they have their like 3 main hits on the album, but there's always that one sleeper banger that's maybe a little more artistic. You caught them in a unique mood. Maybe they're doing LSD and it's just not quite mainstream enough. But anyone who has even a surface level appreciation of music knows that's actually the banger. Like, I think that could be horse legs.
Bringing back horse legs, the connoisseurs, the real lifting enthusiasts, not the people. I will say, and I'll save this, we'll end it here for maybe another episode. I also, Eric, just kind of despise the quasi-transactional mindset some people enter as it relates to hypertrophy, where it's like, what will I gain, basically? So it's social currency, right? So I want to increase my arm size because I feel that in the space, one is valued, or like that always ephemeral, like the Goyles are going to like you, like you're going to do that and you're going to be more desirable as a man. Like there is the manosphere has intersected too much with the fitness space. It needs to go because it's basically insecure young men telling other insecure young men like what to do. You want to pick up a girl? Like, no problem. I got you, bro. Like arms. Like, will you take a look at the arms or the chest? I'm like, everyone needs to stop. Everyone needs to lay off their keyboards, take a chill pill, understand that it's virgins talking to virgins, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being a virgin. I'm saving myself for Jesus, okay, as an example. But what I was going to say, Eric, is that I don't, to your point, man, the transactional element of some of this stuff, or where it's like, it's extraction. So I'm doing this. What will I get in return with either the audience or, let's say, casual lifters by their peers? Again, that is fine and it is valid, but I think there's something to be said about sometimes just taking, maybe describe like natural bodybuilding would definitely fit in this category, the path less traveled, right? Where it is, yeah.
Also, it's more fun, if I may, to instead of having this mindset of I'm not good enough, or I'm not where I want to be in this transactional view of human interaction, and I want to get something, but it better be worth it. I want to guarantee, because this is A, important, and B, it takes time and effort, and I'm uncomfortable. I don't like the way I currently look. Like that whole kind of attitude of being in the manosphere, as you said. That's a very different mindset than like when you're playing a video game and you're trying to get from 19th level to 20th level, and it's very hard. It takes the perfect combination of everything, and you have to figure out your play style, and there's a few different options. That's enjoyable. You're trying to figure out this problem, right? That's fun.
Yeah.
Me going here going, shit, man, I've been training 19 years, and it took me till now to turn pro. And now I'm at the peak of, like, I've become an Olympian, which is something that I never thought I would even accomplish. This might be, I don't know, I may never have a better season than 2023. I may do all this work, all this assessment, all this intellectual analyzing, and then put in all the tons of work that I know I'm going to have to do in the gym, because unfortunately, the recipe that I found for myself is do more volume harder for the specific muscle groups. It's just going to be a lot of work. And it's possible, maybe even likely, some people would say on the internet, that I am capped out and I'm going to do all this work and it's going to produce nothing. But it's so much more exciting to go into it going, let's figure this out. Let's play detective. Let's treat this like a video game. Like, how do I win this optimization game and come out on the other side making gains? That's exciting. I get to create a plan. I get to collaborate with my friends. I get to have hope and have a sense of curiosity and unknown. Like, oh, am I going to be able to make gains? Do I get to have the Rocky story? Or did I have, like, the Rocky story where I tried really hard, but I still lost to Apollo Creed? And, it is what it is. Plucky underdog. He gave it a good shot. And hey, you got to be proud of placing 7th at Worlds. 7th in the world, Eric. It's still pretty good. Like, there's no downside to this, right, for me. And I think approaching it with that mentality, well, this is a really exciting problem to solve, and it's going to be that much more rewarding when I can figure out for me. Because then I get to look back and I go, no, I listened to an Iron Culture episode, and then I spent the next 2 years researching training, trying things out. I hired 2 different coaches. I did X, Y, and Z. I crossed every I, dotted every T, in my life. I overhauled my habits. I created an environment. I got a new gym membership. Hell, I went and traveled and I got a session with this one trainer and this other gym who works with bodybuilders. He assessed my physique. And then I put in 2 years of work. And you know what? I gained another 10 pounds of muscle, or I put on an inch on my arms, or I brought up my legs and I, look what I did. That's really, really fun. Instead of going from the other perspective that you mentioned, where it's this self-loathing, motivated desire to extract something rather than actually accomplish something, challenge yourself, and set forth a goal that you don't know that you can do, but it might be possible, and then have to figure it out on your own and have some ownership of that outcome and feel really good about it. So, choose your own adventure. One's kind of a shitty pathway towards becoming an incel. The other one's the hero story. I'd probably take the latter.
I mean, Eric, it is No Fap November. Like, we are recording this on the final day, so we want to give a shout out to all the No Fapstronauts they've been holding steady, saving their testosterone collectively because they know it's going to lead to a higher level of critical thinking, better choices. Man, when they get that Sigma grind set going on, they're going to be unstoppable. I will say that I think like lifting can be a beautiful thing. And I think you have two enthusiasts that are sharing their collective passion. And you see, unfortunately, the way that some people go when it comes to some of these things, Eric. So it's almost like, let's say, older brother mode where we're like, hey, like, there's a better, like, you think you want to do it for this way. And many of us, we start, it's like almost naively so, like, why we step into the gym. And then, as we've said, it transforms. So it's not actually, not trying to be like, judgmental. It's more personally what I'm just saying. I just find it like cringy because I know from a marketing standpoint how these things can work on impressionable young minds. Like, honestly, and that's why I think this is the very final thing I'll say. Like with Rascal, a lot of it's like almost like they're cultural critiques, like the memes. They're subversive because they are counterculture. They see what the established like narrative is. So like the whole bigger, stronger, sadder. Like I was just thinking about that as you're talking, Eric, where the idea that like you can only cover up so many of the things that you're going through with like, I'll hit another PR, I'll just apply myself more in the gym. Or if I do this, like I'll be worthy enough. I'm like, sometimes you have to do the work on yourself. And once you do the work on yourself, everything else becomes a whole lot easier. So I think like we joke like that was a joke about some of just the let's say the messaging that I've seen in the space. I think sometimes, like, honestly, it's got to be tough. Like we joke, those damn TikTok kids, but just like the idea that more now than ever, like people are judged by their avatar online. And there's that major FOMO if they don't participate. And Eric, everyone else is using filters or they seemingly are making progress. So it's understandable that people have this like chasm within themselves of like where they are, where they should be, and what they need to do. And it's okay to be like either disgruntled or this, and even a bit of that cope. Like honestly, man, like with the lighting,
it's part of the process.
Of like explaining it away. We used to joke all my favorite shit is still powerlifters. No matter what, however things go, a meet day, I can't wait to read your 3 pages of why it didn't go well. You know, like it is what it is. Like the humidity was off. Always the carpet on the bench and the foot slip. Where I understand, it's like there's no such thing as perfect, but that's okay, guys. I think for many people, just staying in love with the actual process, like that's kind of what we're joking about, the transactional element, really just will yield those returns. And like, look at Eric now, 19 years in, turned pro. Is it safe to say, I don't want to speak for you, Eric, and maybe this is the final thing, that you feel it's not like the win, it's the culmination of everything that you've done being once again tethered by some sort of recognition, just to say like you put in the work and like they're like, yeah, you belong. That it almost, I don't want to say revitalized, but like, is it safe to say, Eric, entering the 2024 season of you in the off season now, that it's like a renewed sense of vigor? Is that a fair assessment? Like, what do you feel? Like, I want you to speak for yourself, but
bro, I feel like I wouldn't say that it's a renewed or new sense of vigor. It is like getting to hit nitrous on top of the motivation that I have. Because it's not like I have slacked, you know? But there's a big difference between pursuing the hard work and doing the work, hoping that you can get somewhere while quelling a sense of insecurity and doubt, versus getting beyond that and that sense of security and insecurity and doubt, just having it can't impact me anymore because I've already objectively proven it wrong. So I said I was shooting for the stars and I'd be happy hitting the moon, but a large part of me thought, you're never going to get out of the atmosphere.
Yep.
And then I got on the moon and I'm like, fuck it. I didn't even think this was possible. Maybe the stars are possible. Let's go. You know, so to say I'm fired up, Omar, would be a misuse and a insult to the term fired up. Yep. You know, I am on fire. I have fire and brimstone coming out of my butt, and I haven't even had salsa that's too hot for me to consume. Yeah. I feel like it's the 08 off season, the kind of motivation I had after my first competitive season, but with the wisdom and the direction of someone who's a lot more experienced. And fortunately, the habit base, I feel incredibly in control and incredibly motivated. I don't feel like I'm held back by any BS hangups or insecurity. And I am so excited and so in love with training. I competed on Sunday. I trained on Monday. I trained on Tuesday. I flew home. I got home. I trained. There's a lot of people, and even I'd recommend them as athletes after a contest prep, take a deload, eat your recovery diet to let yourself chill out. Man, I couldn't keep myself out of the gym. And yeah, man, it's easy to be perfect right now. I'm so motivated. Let's put it that way.
Folks, he's jacked up on Mountain Dew. The gym's going to put a restraining order against him because, like, you were just here, sir, go home. It's like, too bad. It's my own home gym. Can't keep me out. Still got that dog in me. And I think sometimes, like, that's what you need, that intersection between having the knowledge, the experience, and then the enthusiasm, because I don't think it's productive at all, not like to be jaded or like all these various qualities that the ability to communicate that. And we talk about iron culture where it's like for all lifters, and it does have longevity kind of baked into the mission statement, that it's always just cool seeing people do the damn thing. Like shout out as an example, like Sean Kelly, the owner of Fortis, where like he's approaching now like towards 60. He's in his like mid to late 50s. And he's still like, now he's doing more BJJ, but you see, I'm like, I don't see dudes that are like close to 60 that's still with his physique. We're like, this dude is rugged and this guy is sturdy, and I would not want an altercation with his thick ass neck. It's like, I would not want to take this guy. Not that I just have to involve like a street altercation, but all that to say that but Sean's that guy. Sean's right. Sean's scrappy. I like Sean a lot, but all that to say that I love always, it's the same thing, Eric, where I saw, because you see yourself there, you can extrapolate, okay, that's going to be me in 30 years and 4 years or whatever. When I was at that other mom and pop gym that used to be a like bodybuilding gym, but it had like a small, close group of people that were members there, and they were the members in like the 70s and the 80s, and some of them like Tom, like Pete, this dude that's front squatting. He was like 57, probably like he was like 5'6", 200 pounds solid, but he's front squatting 315 for reps, like just like quietly in the corner, just like little things like that. I'm like, oh, like isn't that cool? So I'll end it there. Advanced hypertrophy. Eric, where can people find you?
You can find me in the gym. And that's across the street at the YMCA where they got the good hoist machines. And if I forgot that they closed at 4 p.m. on the weekends, you can find me walking back from the gym straight back to my garage to train in my home gym and nowhere else.
Yes.
My wife's going, hey, I woke up, you weren't in bed. And I'm like, you know where I was. I was in the gym.
AM
and she was
session.
Like, that's not healthy. And I'm like, don't talk to me like that.
Yeah,
and then I get back in bed. But no, all seriousness, 3dmusclejourney.com,
yep.
massresearchreview.com, muscleandstrengthpyramids.com, at Helms 3DMJ if you want to follow me on Instagram. And also check your podcast feeds, because we got Mass Office Hours, we got Iron Culture, we got 3D Muscle Journey. You're thinking, when is he in the gym? The guy's always on a podcast. And you know what?
Currently
That's
in the
other
gym.
Place I am. I'm currently in the gym because I train in my house on a podcast. That's what's up.
This whole time you're just doing some calf actual sets. Like they don't even know. They try to take your booty, Eric. You're bringing it back. They try to take out our third host. They can't. We have it on good authority. If this isn't true, Brandon, please edit it out. That he's coming back. We're just the 18 of us of Iron Culture. We are collectively unstoppable. I want to thank you for listening to another episode. You could go ahead and leave a rating and review on iTunes. It does help us out. Typically, people will give 5 stars. It's okay if you don't want to give 5 stars, 6 stars. I understand they're trying to install that just to like what's louder than 5. Well, of course, 6. We'll be back next week. Insert date here from now until the end of time. We'll catch you in that next episode.